afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Susan Checkow-Lusignan, Director of Marketing and Program Development for the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library. Welcome to Book Sandwiched In. Yay. First, a bit of housekeeping. Please silence your cell phones at this time. Our thanks go to those who help fund programs like these through FFRPL, the dedicated FFRPL committee members who curate and organize these events, our guest speakers who so graciously share their time and talents with us, the library's staff who help with our setup and production, and the thousands of people who attend each year. We are live streaming the formal portion of today's program to the library's YouTube channel at Rochester Public Library, New York. If you need to access the induction loop service in the auditorium, please adjust your hearing aid to the T switch. A bit of background, the Friends and Foundation of the Rochester Public Library, or FFRPL, expands the Rochester Public Library's community impact through fundraising, marketing, and programming. We also manage restricted funds that provide supplemental materials support to 62 eligible libraries in Monroe, Ontario, Wayne, Livingston, Orleans, and Genesee counties. One way we raise funds is from book sales on-site and online. Shop the current bag sale in front of the library store, just outside this auditorium, for $1 for a bag of books. Or browse our online inventory of thousands of quality used books at AbeBooks, Alibris, and Biblio. Search for RPL Library Store at those sites. FFRPL presents programs like today's Book Sandwiched In Review and our annual Sokol High School Literary Awards. We invite you to attend the Sokol Awards ceremony this Thursday, April 24th at 4 p.m. in this auditorium. FFRPL supports the library's special community programs and projects, such as RPL's new Aviation Station program, a 2-month intensive course designed for youth ages 13 to 17 years old, offered through the Sully Branch Library. We also support library exhibits. We are the founding sponsor of Central's signature Art of the Book and Paper exhibit. The registration deadline for the 2025 show is May 16th. Visit ffrpl.org for details and the link to the entry form. FFRPL helps to create specialized spaces, such as the new mobile library, RPL Go, which is now operating as part of the Lisle Branch's hybrid services. RPL Go supports the library's mission to engage the community in lifelong learning through equal access to information, technology, and expert staff. And finally, FFRPL purchases supplemental materials for the library. For the last 6 years, we have purchased New York State Empire passes for every MCLS library, Central, Branches, and all the towns. Empire passes provide free access at New York State Parks and the State Department of Environmental Conservation, including forests, beaches, and trails. And the passes are available for checkout with your library card. Today, Emily Hesney Lynch will review Briefly Perfectly Human, Making an Authentic Life by Getting Real About the End by Alua Arthur. Alua Arthur is one of America's most visible death doulas, someone who guides a person who is transitioning to death through the dying process while helping to support their loved ones as well. Alua has been present for thousands of end-of-life moments, and she helps manage all aspects of patient care, from practical business matters to medical directives, memorial planning, and quiet moments when emotional stories are often expressed. Arthur says, quote, "The experiences we have while dying are universal, yet we feel most alone while journeying through it." Our presenter, Emily Hesney Lynch, is a social media consultant, writer, professor, library trustee, book club organizer, and mother who believes that we should all talk about death more often. Please welcome Emily to our podium.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to talk with you about death on a beautiful spring day. So as Susan said, my name is Emily Hesney Lynch. I wanted to share a little bit about myself before we dive in. So death is not the area that I work in, actually. I went to the U of R for my undergrad and my master's. I worked there for a little while in financial aid and counseled students, and I did communications for the office. I worked at a tech startup incubator and eventually started my own business doing social media marketing. And I've been doing that for almost 6 years now. I've got some of my clients on here, like Push Physical Theater, the kids' TV show Bluey is one I worked with in the past. And I also serve on boards. I served on the Cameron Community Board for several years, and I'm currently a trustee for the Monroe County Library System. So I don't do anything professionally with death, so why am I here to talk to you about this memoir? Here's how I got interested in death. 4 years ago, my mom and my grandma died 5 weeks apart from each other. Really, really brutal timing there. My grandma went first in February and my mom in April. Up here on the top left, you can see my mom's dog on her hospital bed when she was in hospice. And I hate to tell you this, but the dog died a year later. So really a real string of death here. This is a selfie from the bathroom at the funeral for my mom, my grandma's grave, my mom's grave. I learned so much about the death and dying process, and I felt like I was so ill-prepared for it, and it was really a catalyst for me to just want to learn more and more about death and dying and what is going on in this industry and why it's so hard and isolating to navigate. I actually ended up getting a tattoo from a German children's book about death because that was so meaningful to me. So you can see that here in the middle, and I'll share the name of that book at the end as well. So I consider myself to be death positive, and I don't know, how many people are familiar with the death positive movement? Has anyone heard of that? A little bit? So death positive essentially is just not I love death, I'm so excited people are dying. It's really just that it's okay to be interested in death. It's about busting all the taboos that surround it and just talking about it openly and honestly. It's a huge part of life. No one is going to get out of this life alive, so why not talk about it? It was founded by someone named Caitlin Doty, who once back in 2013 tweeted about how there are tons of websites about being sex positive, but there's nothing out there about being death positive. So she really wanted to encourage people to have these conversations and founded something called the Order of the Good Death, which I would recommend as a resource as well. Other beliefs that are part of the death positive movement are things like dead bodies are not inherently dangerous. There's nothing wrong with sitting with a dead body, caring for the dead body of your loved one. They believe that we should honor people's end-of-life wishes and that we should have more eco-friendly death practices. So there's a sustainability aspect as well. If you're not familiar with being a death doula, which is what Alua Arthur, the author of this memoir, is, death doulas are not hospice nurses, they are not medical professionals, but they offer a lot of different services that can help people near the end of their lives. They can help both the dying person and their loved ones before, during, and after death. So there's emotional and physical support they can provide, they can help with advanced directives, they can educate you about the dying process and signs of dying, and give you lots of companionship and resources along the way. So there's tons of stuff that they do. And I did look at the Cleveland Clinic and the Death Doula Association if you're interested in learning more about those. Those are good resources. If you do choose to read this book, a few content warnings that you will encounter. It talks about death, of course, since it is a memoir of a death doula. Cancer comes up, but this is also very much about the author's own journey. So it talks about her mental health, including depression, some suicidal ideation and suicide in one of her clients. Racism comes up as well, and she does take psychedelics during the book. So if those are things you don't want to read about, it might not be the book for you. I think there are a lot of misconceptions when people glance at the title of this book. So I just wanted to highlight what it is and isn't. It is definitely a memoir. If you pick it up expecting it to be a how-to guide about becoming a death doula or how to die or what to do at the end of life, it's not going to be exactly that. It really is her personal story. It looks at how she came to this career and how she developed the relationship she has with death today. It's not exactly a story of every client she's ever worked with, but it does highlight some of the stories. It is very non-linear and meandering, so if you like a good chronological story that's going to be very straightforward, this is not that either. It doesn't go in chronological order. It's not like, here are the steps I took. It is a big period of her life she felt very lost, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. It's very personal, philosophical, and vulnerable as well, but it's not academic or clinical. So this book is for anyone who's interested in death and dying, or even someone who's scared of it and wants to dive in. If you're really avoidant of those topics, which you're probably not since you're here today, then avoidant folks are the ones who might not pick it up. If you are really passionate about living an authentic life, this book is definitely for you. If you've stayed more on the expected path and it doesn't bother you, or you feel like you can wear a mask at work and be a different person at home, not really your vibe. If you really care about mental health, or you've had your own mental health struggles, then definitely a book you might enjoy. If you can't really relate to mental health struggles, probably not for you. If you've felt lost at any time, purposeless, restless, there's a lot of that in her journey. But if you've never deviated from your path or never felt lost, I think everyone's probably felt lost at some point. If you're on the fringes of society, definitely a book for you. She talks about how working in death comes more naturally to people on the fringes, whether you're from an ethnic or racial minority, whether you're queer or transgender. Any of those things might make you more gravitate towards death. If you're very normal, mainstream, it might not be as interesting to you. If you care about intersectionality, we get a lot of her experiences as a Ghanaian woman who moved to America later on, and how race intersects with death, with sexuality. So if you think that that is woke, this probably isn't the book for you either. She also is a big swearer, so if you'll be turned off by swearing, you might not want to read the book because she does curse. So where does her story start? The book picks up, like I said, non-linearly. We start with a trip to Cuba that she takes when she is completely miserable in her job as a lawyer. She's working at the Legal Aid Society, and she's been there for about 9 years. She feels like this is what she should be doing. It's what her parents wanted for her, but she is just chafing at it so much. She actually has a near-death experience while she's in Cuba. She almost gets hit by a car, and she lives. Then she gets on this bus that she was about to miss, and a girl saves her a seat that she met, and it's a German girl. They start chatting. And the German girl, it turns out, has uterine cancer and could die very soon. No one in her life wants to talk to her about it. And Alua Arthur has this long, deep conversation about death and dying. And at the end, the girl says, "I was in that car that almost hit you." So many weird coincidences that lead her to start to shift her path away from law and towards death. She says in the opening chapter, the only thing in our control is how we choose to engage with our mortality once we become aware of it. So a lot of our society lives in denial that we're all going to die, but we know it's coming, so how are we going to engage with it? She then backtracks a little to talk about her childhood and growing up in Ghana. She was born in 1978 in Accra, Ghana. Her earliest memory is being 3 years old and fleeing from a coup. So very disruptive start to her childhood. There was a major coup. Her dad was actually a government official, and they were living in a building for government officials, and the military was coming for them, so they had to run. And from there, they became political refugees. They moved all around the world. They lived in California, Nairobi. They traveled a lot, went back to Ghana for a brief period of time. Eventually, they settled in the US long-term when she was 11 years old. But for her, she says, home was always a fleeting concept for me. I've had to learn to cultivate it in my body. So she talks a lot about being really restless and not knowing where she wants to be or how to feel safe in home. Another major catalyst for her when she wants to go into this death doula work is when her brother-in-law, Peter, is dying. So her sister, Bozoma, is married to Peter, who is just this wonderful Boston guy, and he has had a great relationship with Alua her whole life, and he's dying of cancer, and no one around them will say it. All the medical professionals don't name how close he is, and she's very frustrated. He goes through something called the death rally, where right before you die, you kind of have this uplifted moment where you seem just like your old self, just for a day or so, and everyone thought he was recovering, and no one told them that it was the death rally and he was going so soon. So she becomes so frustrated with these uncaring systems, especially in the aftermath of his death. She's trying to get the title of his car and transfer it to his nephew, and it's just a mess at the DMV and closing credit cards and all the bureaucratic nonsense you have to deal with. And she writes, "What the fuck kind of society understands the universality of a painful experience but does next to nothing about it? I came to death work because I wanted to help fix the system that I saw. I couldn't take their pain away. but I could let them know that someone was here. I could be their witness. I think that's something a lot of us need in various points of our life before death and when it comes to the dying process. So really interesting to hear how much witnessing is important. Wanted to highlight some of the skills that make a good death doula. She does touch on that a bit. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into it, so knowing the practicalities around how to prepare for death, what kind of bureaucracy and legalities you'll have to navigate along the way, resources you can refer folks to. Also, bringing to the table awareness of your own biases and privilege is really important. You have to have an evolving relationship with your own mortality. You can't ignore that. You also have to be able to take care of your own needs, so you can't pour from an empty cup and serve others if you're not taking care of yourself. And other skills and abilities, being able to create rituals for people, so that's a lot of what she does when they're on their deathbed, doing things that will be special for them. Being able to hold multiple truths or complex emotions at once, so helping people navigate all the messy feelings that come with this. Being emotionally present with them, and being compassionate are all really important skills to have. Living authentically was a major theme in this book. So as I mentioned, she hated her job at Legal Aid as a lawyer. She felt like she was really trying to conform to social expectations and norms. And travel was a way that she could kind of numb her feelings. So she traveled all over the world. She'd be draining her bank account on this tiny legal aid salary and just going wherever she could, whenever she could. She even cut her hours back to only 21 hours a week so she could work as little as possible and then travel. There's a lot of her relationships in this memoir as well. She dates a lot of different men and kind of loses herself in those relationships. And then sometimes she would just go shopping and buy new suits so she could look the part of the lawyer, even though she hated them. She wanted to wear bright and bold colors and just be her truest self, but she was just wearing gray suits and really not acting like her truest self. So it was hard for her to actually face the reality of how trapped she felt in this job. One of the client stories I really loved in this book was about a man named Ken, who on his deathbed, he had liked to express himself through clothing in a lot of different ways. He wore skirts and dresses sometimes. He loved to paint his nails just for fun. And his family was not okay with that. They thought it was very weird, frowned upon it, and the one thing he wanted was to have blue and purple glittery nail polish in his coffin. So as his death doula, Arthur made sure that he could have the nails he wanted when he was in his coffin. She worked with his niece, who really understood the request and where he was coming from, to kind of talk that through with the family and convince them, and they came to an agreement that rather than having his hands folded where you would see them, they were at his side for the viewing, but he still got to have the nail polish he wanted. So that authenticity, I think, really inspired her to keep living in her own truths as well. Of the time when she's at Legal Aid, she writes, "I was slowly killing myself, shrinking my joy, and murdering my own light." So if you watch, she has a TED Talk. If you watch any of her videos like that, you'll see what a bright person she is who wants to live loud and proud, and being a lawyer was just not doing it for her. Another major theme here is finding purpose. So finding purpose seems so important to all of us at various points in our life. She really struggles with that, and when she graduates college, before she goes to law school, she goes off to Thailand and works in a YMCA doing HIV and AIDS education, and she keeps pushing back the time she's supposed to come back. She really does not want to start law school. Eventually, she does go to law school, and like I said, ends up at Legal Aid. When she's at Legal Aid, she ends up taking a break to go to Burning Man, and at Burning Man, she feels so reinvigorated and creatively inspired just because there's so much amazing art and energy and just people being really weird and living their truth. So she decides, they give her a call, Legal Aid, and she had been working in what she called a dungeon in a basement on a short-term assignment, and they say, "We need you in the dungeon for 6 more months." And that's when she says, "I can't do it, I'm not going back." And she doesn't quite face the truth yet, she keeps running away. There's a guy she met at Burning Man, so she meets up with him, his name is Pasha, in Portland, and then it doesn't go well with Pasha. She then goes to Colorado to stay with a friend, and that's when her depression, she starts to reckon with how bad it is. So after visiting the friend, she goes to Cuba, and that's kind of the next catalyst. When she talks about finding purpose, one thing that I thought was really interesting was we don't all have one sole purpose necessarily. Maybe some of us do, maybe some of us don't. becoming a death doula is one facet of her identity, but it's not her sole purpose in life. She talks a little bit about how capitalism makes us all think our job is what defines us, but that really isn't the case. She writes, "I've come to believe that my life does not have a singular purpose. Maybe yours doesn't either. The search for purpose itself, the worship of some glamorized future where everything suddenly makes sense, can be blinding. While we're obsessed with trying to make meaning and purpose out of life, we can miss the experience of being here. If it brings you joy, make meaning out of the mundane." I love that quote for a lot of reasons. I'm someone who has a lot of different passions with teaching, with consulting. I have a 10-month-old baby at home. I'm always pulled in so many different directions, and I keep thinking of this quote lately and trying to just enjoy the mundane, simple moments for what they are and not get too trapped in what's my purpose, what's the next thing to do, how can I do it all? Another major theme in the book is just the importance of feeling all the complex emotions that come up. So it's really common to numb our emotions or hide them because our society glamorizes the good ones, but really emotions are a spectrum. There's no good or bad emotion. The language that we hear a lot around death, like being a cancer warrior or losing their battle with cancer, can really make people feel like they can't express how they're feeling in the moment. They might be scared, they might be angry, they might be sad, and if they're forced to just be a warrior and fight this battle, it's not going to feel great. My mom didn't love being called a cancer warrior. She really chafed at that. And a client that she talks about in this book, Summer, is one who also gets called a cancer warrior. She's in her 20s and she's dying of cancer. And she hates hearing that term and doesn't want to talk about it. She talks about her dance with cancer instead as something that she's engaged with, moving through the world, but it's not a fight necessarily. It's just something that's happening. And that lets her feel all of her feelings more than just focusing on being a fighter. All of our emotions are valid, and shaming people for having negative emotions doesn't help. It actually makes it much harder to ask for help and to be vulnerable. People end up suffering and feeling even more alone. So Arthur talks about how depressed she was when she was at legal aid and how much her family wanted her to be happy, her friends wanted her to be happy. There wasn't really space for her to open up and talk about how she was truly feeling. This is another quote I really appreciated from the book. "We celebrate wellness and we leave no space for sorrow, brokenness, grief, or anything other than I'm fine. When the truth is life is complicated, painful, and difficult. Whole humans feel a whole range of emotions, but we applaud only half of them. We drive our negatively perceived emotions deep into hiding for fear of judgment. There they are safe to fester and grow stronger, which in turn drives us to hide them more." So I know many of you have probably experienced some kind of loss in your life. When my mom and my grandma died so close to each other, I work for myself, so I could take as much or as little time off as I wanted to, but I work for myself, so I have to keep working to earn an income. There's no real bereavement time. So I didn't really have a lot of time and space to process those complex feelings. I just had to keep moving, and I even wrote a blog post about taking bereavement time as a freelancer when I had barely taken any. So giving everyone more space to process, checking in on people longer after the fact. Grief is non-linear and can last for a very long time. It's not something that's over like that. I wanted to highlight some of my favorite insights from the book as well. There's one whole chapter called Show Up and Shut Up. And I think that's a really important way of approaching things when you're trying to support someone, whether it's through a hard time or through the dying process. You don't have to fix how they're feeling. That is not your job. Just being there and being present with them can mean so much more. It might be uncomfortable for you to see them that way, but witnessing their pain is helpful and valuable. You can let people talk about whatever they want to talk about. If they want to just shoot the shit about the weather, that's fine. If they want to talk about their pain, their memories, all of that is totally fine. You don't need to insert your own experience and say, this is how it was for me, and try to teach them a lesson. Just be present, bear witness. She writes, "We must get comfortable with the part of ourselves that feels helpless in the face of another person's pain. Just be in the trenches with them and give them the incredible gift of bearing witness." This is just a nice little reminder of the difference between compassion and empathy. I think a lot of us conflate the two terms. She shares that being empathetic can be kind of patronizing in a way if you don't know what the person's needs are, what their lived experiences are, and you think, oh, I've been in your shoes before, I know exactly how you're feeling, and this is what you need. You don't. Even if you've lived through a similar situation, they're a completely different person with different needs and preferences than you. So aiming for compassion instead is better. Empathy says, I know what you're going through. Compassion says, I might not understand exactly what you're going through, but I'm curious about your experience, and I understand that it's tough, and I'm right there with you. So curiosity, presence, again, bearing witness. Death is not the great equalizer. This is another insight that I thought was excellent. I think we all kind of say, oh yeah, sure, it's the great equalizer. She's very passionate about this and points out that cultural and systemic issues are very much present when we are going through the death and dying process. For example, transgender folks might want their gender identity honored in death, but there might be conflict with family or laws or the funeral home that might prevent that. But death doulas always try to honor the identity of the person and what they want and what their wishes are. She says death and dying are culturally constructed processes that reflect social power dynamics. They're unequal. How we die is wrapped up largely in the intersections of our identities. She shares some interesting client stories here as well. So if you read the book, you'll get to go a little deeper on this one. Grief is really complicated for a lot of different reasons, and this chapter really resonated with me. She talks about how it's not straightforward at all, and you have to honor difficult relationships and the full spectrum of human emotion. So for me, I had a pretty difficult relationship with my mom, and when she died, I felt some really complicated emotions, and a lot of ones people might not expect. I felt relief. I felt anger. I felt angry that my family pretended that she wasn't dying of cancer, and like it was a huge surprise when she was gone. So we shouldn't make assumptions about what other people are feeling when they die. You can't project your own feelings onto someone else. She writes about how we are not to speak ill of the dead. When we can't say something nice, we're taught to say nothing at all. This suppresses the very human need to grieve difficult relationships. Not everyone is sad when someone dies. Some are relieved. We need to make room for the other responses to death, not just sadness and despair, to honor the lushness of human experience. So I really loved that chapter, and she does have a great story in here about a woman who finds out her father had another family, and he had 5 kids with another woman. And she had to, as the death doula, help them mediate that and figure out how to all be there with the father on his deathbed when they were all angry and sad and confused and scared. So it's a really complicated process, and there are a lot of different emotions people might feel. Legacy is always a work in progress. I thought this was a really interesting point that she makes in the book as well. So legacy is not just about money or leaving something behind, like a building named after you. And it's not just your kids or your legacy or you published a book. It's not necessarily about those bigger accomplishments you might think. You actually create your own legacy every day in small ways as well. Arthur writes, we leave a legacy with every word, every smile, every action, and every inaction. It's not optional. Our legacies can be big or small. What matters is we all touch someone, and how we do it is up to us. So I thought that's a nice thought-provoking one for all of us to consider today as we leave here. The ending of the book is an epilogue where she writes about her vision of a good death. One of the services she offers as a death doula is a death meditation, and the final piece here is her own kind of meditation and vision for what she wants her death to look like. She talks about being outside on her back deck surrounded by sunflowers and peonies. She wants to have her family nearby but not monitoring her too closely. She thinks about every practical aspect, like having her lips and skin moisturized. She says she'll never go out of this world ashy. She does not want to have a bra on at the end. She wants a green burial, so that's when you are buried without a coffin or embalming or anything. You are put directly in the ground with a shroud that will biodegrade. She wants hers to be pink and orange. And she's going to have guests take home her jewelry. She's going to sprinkle them all around the trees, and people can take home something of hers. When she talks about the girl dying of cancer earlier in the book, that girl has a shot glass collection. She's only in her 20s, so she has everyone take a shot at her funeral and bring home a shot glass. So small ways to make it more personal and make people feel connected to you. She also talks about having an overwhelming feeling of love as she's dying. People often ask her if the experience of death itself is painful, and she of course has to tell them she doesn't know because she hasn't died yet. But what she's witnessed, it is not painful itself to die. The disease that might be killing you at the end is probably painful, but your medical team can help you manage that pain. So actually leaving the world shouldn't be painful, and hopefully we all feel very loved at the end. We're getting near the end here. I wanted to give you all some homework. I'll probably never see you again, so I don't know if you'll do your homework, but this quote is great. Our collective death denial inspires us to behave like we can live forever, but we don't have forever to create the life we want. So think about what a life would look like that you feel comfortable dying from. We don't have any promises about how long we're gonna live. We can't be sure we'll all live to 90 or 100, so start thinking about it and making small changes, whether that's to your relationships, your work, how you spend your time. And I would love it if you all leave here today and talk to someone about death. We have to normalize having these conversations and normalize all the complicated feelings that come with it. So talk to someone you trust or talk to a stranger. I think it's definitely worth having these conversations. I've gone down the rabbit hole, like I said, with the death positive movement. So here are some resources that I really love. I mentioned Caitlin Doty earlier. The founder of the Order of the Good Death is the name of the death positive organization. There's their logo over here. She has a few books. One of them is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. That's her memoir of working at a crematory. So that was her first part of her career, and she gets really into the nitty-gritty of that. So if that might turn you off, skip that one. From Here to Eternity is her book about the different rituals and cultural beliefs about death in other parts of the world. So that one's super interesting as well. The In Between is a memoir by a hospice nurse. She talks about a lot of different clients she's worked with and what people experience at the end of life. Duck, Death, and the Tulip is the children's book I mentioned. It's a German children's book about how death is a friend who is going to spend some time with you and help you move on. Mortal is the name of an online class you can take with Alua Arthur and Caitlin Doty, so I took that and enjoyed it. The American Way of Death was one of the first exposés and books about death. It's from the 60s by Jessica Mitford, and she talks about how much the funeral industry tries to make a profit off of all of us, so she's not as into like the death positive thing that came later, but still an interesting read. And Under the Whispering Door is a really lovely YA novel about death and navigating the end of life. Lastly, up top, I have a logo for death cafes, which are a thing where you can go and talk about death with other people. The library has hosted several of them with death doulas. Lots of different branches around the city have had them. So watch out on the events calendar and see if there are any coming up near us in the future. We've got a few minutes for questions, and if you enjoyed listening to me talk today, I have ways you can stay in touch with my Instagram, a newsletter on Substack. I've got my website here, and I am launching a podcast in a few weeks about things that are a lot. So social media, being a parent, we might talk about death and dying too. There's a lot of things that are a lot, so I'm looking forward to that. But what questions do folks have that you want to ask today? Oh, yeah.